I will then go ahead and call to the order of meeting Cincinnati Preschool Promise Board of Managers meeting for January the 19th, 2021, starting at 4 o'clock. Please note that in conjunction with the Ohio State Revised Sunshine Laws and the rules limiting the number of people who may meet in a space, CPP has decided to convene the meeting video conferencing in accordance with Ohio Public Records and Open Meeting Laws. CPP have advertised the meeting on its website in advance and has provided a link for members of the public to listen and view the meeting. This meeting will be video recorded, and a copy of the meeting minutes, including any documentation, will be made available.
Thank you.
And the CPC website, under the area who we are, our impact, our meeting schedule, our approved meeting minutes, as soon as possible after this meeting. Okay, so I will ask Micah to do the roll call.
Deborah Alsop.
Here.
Bianca Edwards. Bianca Edwards. Terry England.
Marshall?
I know I saw Terry on there.
Here.
Christine Fisher.
Here.
Marcia Patel.
Here.
Anthony Hobson. Anthony Hobson. I am here. Gary Lindgren. Gary Lindgren. Dr. Owens. No, he's here. Cheryl Rose. Cheryl Rose. Laura San Regret.
She's here.
Laura, you might be on mute.
I'm here.
There we go. Bishop Tate.
Present.
Sally Westheimer.
Here.
Vanessa White. Vanessa White. And Dr. H. James Williams.
Here.
Okay.
And Cheryl joined late.
And Cheryl Rose is here?
Yes, present.
Okay.
Dr. Owens, Tony Hobson is here too.
Oh, great, great. So Micah, you have all those names?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. I would like a motion to approve our agenda for today, unless there's anyone have any additions.
So move.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? I can't see you. All those are against? All right, that's great. It's passed. Was there anyone who voted against it? I guess we should go backwards. Okay. All right. We'll take again, approval for the minutes from November the 17th, 2020.
I move to So approve. the
moved by
minutes.
Cheryl.
Okay. Do a first and a second. I see
Second by
Sally,
Laura.
who seconded it, and Laura.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor?
I see a correct.
Aye.
I have a
Oh, is there
correct.
any correct? I'm sorry. Any corrections or additions?
I
This
have
is
a
the,
correction.
Okay.
Is there somebody else too that had a correction?
yes.
Okay. I will yield to you first, and then I have a small one.
Oh, I was present. This is Vanessa.
Okay. You had a correction to the minutes, Vanessa?
Yeah, I was present. It has me as absent.
Oh, okay. They have you as absence. Okay. All right. We'll make that correction.
This is Debbie.
Yes.
I had asked, and it's in the minutes for October 22nd, that the language with respect to Father Graham's resignation be changed. On page 1, it's still listed as his departure, and I would like that to be changed to resignation on that day. So the minutes of the November 17th meeting to be changed to align with the correction that was made in the October 22nd minutes.
Okay. Any other corrections or additions? Then I'll accept a motion for acceptance.
So moved.
Second.
Second? Okay.
Second.
Okay, I guess we'll try this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, motion for of the minutes is approved. Okay, our mission moment, Morgan Tolliver of Inspired Kids Childcare. Welcome. Is she here?
Just a moment, we'll be pulling the video in.
Oh, it's a
The video
video, okay.
presentation.
Hello, everyone. Lakeisha Ely with Cincinnati Preschool Promise, Community Engagement and Marketing Manager. And I'm so excited to bring this mission moment with our very own Preschool Promise provider, Morgan Tolliver. She is an administrator. She is the owner. She's the teacher at but providing access to high quality preschools and making sure that they're kindergarten readiness. But what is the value that you have received from Cincinnati Preschool Promise, whether it be financial or just even so much about, I know you just spoke about the 4C, but what do you see value so we can make sure that families and other providers can engage in this space as well?
Well, are we moving? Well, we'll use tuition assistance, for instance, which has again helped my program tremendously. And we can start with again giving my families the opportunity to be able to afford quality childcare. I think that's the most important thing here. You know, it's just kind of I like the fact that we're other agencies, their parents are required to maybe be in school or working, where it's more income based, where I think Preschool Promise allows those parents that they may not be currently employed, but that, just because a parent isn't employed does not mean their child does not need to be in a quality, childcare. They still need to go to school. So I do appreciate that. It just gives a wide variety and options for the parent.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And then also, it will, it has helped me, in providing competitive salaries for my employees, which also helps with retention, and which is important, and it allows me to, when I'm hiring, to seek out quality candidates, and I'm able to pay them. It helps a lot. And then lastly, training. We are required to have, a certain amount of hours completed. And, you all provide a variety of trainings to help us with our to stay on track with our professional development. So those things I find very valuable with the partnership with you all.
Well, I do appreciate you speaking about how Cincinnati Preschool Promise has been beneficial to you as a business owner and provider, as well as to your families. because as we said, our whole mission is all about making high quality affordable in order for our youngest learners to be able to be kindergarten ready. So you have just now tuned in with our short little interview about our mission moment and purpose with Morgan Tolliver, owner and administrator at Inspired Kids, child care. Sorry, I had to get it all together. I'll get it all together.
It's all right.
Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate you. And just we love what you do. We're keeping the promise and we're moving forward.
Well, thank you. Any comments from the board?
I will say, I did want to mention that Ms. Tolliver was part of quality improvement. Then she moved to tuition assistance, and she is also a Teacher Promise Grant recipient.
Great. Any other board comments?
So how many stars does she carry?
Char, did you hear that question?
I did
No,
not.
We're having some Zoom problems. It looks like I got a big black screen now.
I was just curious, Chara, how many stars does Inspire carry?
I think Inspire is one of our 4-star providers.
Thanks.
Okay. Does anyone else have any Zoom problems?
I
Yes.
Okay.
I saw the black screen as well.
Okay. All right. We'll try to muddle through this then.
I see
All right.
two.
Let's go ahead. We're going to have a refresh of our governance structure and goals, and we have asked Jacob to lead this. And part of it was just to, I think, at the beginning of the year, to remind all of us why are we here, what's our role, and what's our individual role within each of the committees that we have designated, and to redefine our role there, and to also make sure we're giving those committees the kind of support they need to be successful. But also, I think more importantly, for us to ensure that we stay within our lane within those committees. It sort of came out during, as we recall last year through the evaluation, that at times we should give Chara the right to say no. If someone's asking her for information that's really not related to that committee, or if it's an issue that really should be brought to the board, they should be brought to the board committee, to the whole board, to be dealt with. So I just asked for a review of that, and I've asked our lawyer to lead that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Owens. I've only got a little amount of time. I want to be respectful of your time. So if during this you find that I'm going too fast, feel free to just dive in and ask any questions, interrupt me, do whatever you need to do. I'm going to work off of the executive summary, which is on the second page of what is on your screen. This is kind of the outlines. I'm going to be working right from this memo. Some of the individuals on the executive committee and the governance committee have heard bits and pieces of this presentation before, but really, as Dr. Owens said, this is a great opportunity now that we have kind of gotten past levy time. We are in what feels like a new chapter, and we've been operating now for years. It is a good time to regroup and say, okay, what are our goals? How are we organized? How do we function? And how will we function in the future? And, you know, that's important for kind of nonprofit best practices. And that's why this is what we see as the first part of a board education presentation. Some of this will be very high level overview. A lot of you know some of these things, but you know, I ask, bear with me, because there may be something that even you didn't think about, or it's always a good reminder to hear about. So I will dive right in, and I'll give you kind of an overview of what I'm going to talk about first. The first thing I'm going to talk about is an overview of Preschool Promise's primary governing and operational documents. Now, the governing documents describe kind of the structure of Cincinnati Preschool Promise, as well as who will govern and how they will govern. The operational documents, on the other hand, describe what our goals are and how we're going to execute on those goals. And then in part two, we can just briefly talk about, okay, what are the goals of Preschool Promise? What is kind of the history of it? How did we get where we are today? And how does that translate into those those operational documents that we will talk about. I will segue from that straight into the master agreement, which is the primary operational document. That's always a discussion that I think generates a lot of confusion, a lot of conversation. The master agreement is this kind of polarizing lightning rod of a document, but there's a few things that I think the board should be alerted to in terms of, hey, when does the master agreement expire? What are we doing in the meantime to renew the terms of the master agreement? Any changes that we need to make, et cetera. And then finally, what I think is the most important from an operational and a moving forward standpoint is final section 4, the focus on is this kind of bifurcation of authority, or the duality between the board of managers and the executive team and her staff. And it's just a question that comes up time and again from many different organizations in terms of what types of things should we be delegating. To Dr. Owen's point, should we be giving, Shar or her team the ability occasionally to say no? When does she have the discretion to make a good business judgment? And when should we step back and let her make the decisions? So just all great things for nonprofit best practices that we'll get into. On that first part, I'll dive right into the governance documents. So in order of what is really a hierarchy, you've got the articles of organization at the very top, followed by the operating agreement, and then the governance principles, and finally the committee charters. Again, this could be very high level overview for some of you, but it is interesting if you're a geek like me, and it's also something that's just good to keep in the back of your mind, because some of you may have heard these terms and maybe don't fully understand where they're coming from. So the articles of organization is the start of really any limited liability company. Sometimes you'll hear in the corporation context, these are referred to as the articles of incorporation. Cincinnati Preschool Promise is a limited liability company, which is very similar for all practical intents and purposes to a corporation, with a few different kind of nomenclatures, which I will point out along the way. So in September 28, 2016, Preschool Promise officially became an entity by filing the Articles of Organization with the Secretary of State. Those are very short. That's like a 1 or 2 page form that basically says, here's our name, welcome to the world, and here's our purpose, which is for charitable, educational, et cetera purposes, which then kind of segues into our filing with the IRS for tax exempt status. Very bare bones document where the rubber begins to meet the road, kind of the skeleton or the bones of the skeleton that is Preschool Promise comes from the operating agreement. The operating agreement is actually a contract between Cincinnati Preschool Promise, the entity, and the sole member, the United Way. What is important here is that although the United Way is the sole member of Cincinnati Preschool Promise, in this document, it delegates nearly all of its governing authority to a 15-person board of managers. And that really gives incredibly broad discretion within the charitable goals that we've set forth and within what we will talk about as our operational goals for that 15-person board of managers to govern. And a couple of important provisions I've included in the memo, but effectively, in addition to that delegation of authority, it talks about who will govern and how that will be structured. So amongst the 15 members, 5 members are chosen by each of the 3 nominating entities. That's the United Way, what is now Promise Forward, and CPS. So each of them get we call this the equal representation clause, because each have the ability to nominate an equal 1/3 of the managers on that board. And it also gives the board the ability to delegate further authority to committees, right? There's a bout to reality that 15 people cannot always act in every single capacity, and that there may be some board members that have some expertise that others do not, and therefore they should be on a specific committee to tackle very specific issues. The most detailed of these documents then is the governance principles. This is really a living document which has been around since inception, but I call it a living document because every year we look at it, and even between annual meetings, we look at it and determine, is there any updates that need to be done? Those updates are then kind of voted on by the full board and codified within the governance principles. You'll see an updated version of it as we go along. If the operating agreement says how the organization is structured and who will govern, the governance principles really say, how are those individuals going to govern? These governance principles include everything from board conflict disclosures to how we're going to delegate authority to committees and when committees will report, et cetera. So there's a lot of good stuff in those governance principles. That is probably the most detailed of all the governance documents, and it's probably the one that most of you are used to seeing. Then we've got committee charters. So these governance principles, I should say, establish 4 standing committees, right? There's the executive committee, which we're all aware of, the governance committee, the finance and audit committee, and the community engagement committee. Ad hoc committees can be created by the full board as they need to, as is appropriate. These committee charters are individual charters made up by each of the committees that decide, kind of in a small board fashion, how they're each going to internally govern. Now, each committee is limited to the power which was delegated to it by the full board. So it can't expand its own power, but within the power that's delegated to the committee, these committee charters say what our goals are, our purposes are, how often we're going to meet, how we're going to choose our rankings, et cetera. So that's the governance documents. The operational documents really begin with the master agreement. The master agreement was this document that kind of, if you will, started it all. It is not a perfect agreement. You'll hear a lot of moans every time you hear somebody say the master agreement. And you'll usually hear that followed up with, let's not be the perfect, be the enemy of the good. This is a long document that was executed by Preschool Promise, the United Way, and the CPS Board of Education. Effectively, what this does is it discusses how the funds are going to flow. The funds would flow from the tax levy dollars, and eventually how we're going to translate those funds into our operational goals. I will discuss the master agreement a little bit more in the next section, but that's just a good tee up of most of these other operational documents kind of stem from the terms of that master agreement, including the next one, which is the United Way Services Agreement. So specifically within the master agreement, it references that the United Way is going to provide certain services, administrative functions, executive management, financial, HR functions, et cetera. In exchange for that, Preschool Promise would pay a waivable $200,000 fee. Every year that fee has been waived, we have no reason to believe that it will not be waived in the future. And then finally, kind of reflective of our 2 primary goals is the tuition assistance and the quality improvement manuals. This is about as operational as you can get, because this really describes the qualification of providers to qualify for tuition assistance, for quality improvement. This is us hitting the ground with the broad goals that were set forth in the master agreement, saying exactly how we are going to execute on those goals. Those 2 are updated from time to time as we deem reasonably appropriate within kind of our ability to do so. I'm going to pause right there. That was a lot. Does anybody have any questions on any of those documents? Okay. So I'll move on then to what are the goals? How was CPS or CPP kind of founded? So this really started in 2012. There was a large group of community members that got together and wanted to solve kind of the problem of what they saw, which is a lack of kindergarten readiness. There was a RAND study done. Oftentimes you will hear references to this RAND study, but effectively what the RAND study found was that there were 2 issues that were affecting kindergarten readiness rates in Cincinnati. First one was family income, and the second one was a lack of quality preschool seats. Those 2 things, I think you can tell, eventually translated not only into Cincinnati Preschool Promise, but our 2 primary goals, which are to increase the number of quality preschool seats and then increase access to those seats. We would all agree that you cannot be successful having just one and not the other. Those 2 have to happen kind of simpatico. In order for us to feel that we have been successful, we need to achieve both of those goals. So that is kind of the impetus of all of this. This is how the master agreement got started. This is the birthplace of Cincinnati Preschool Promise. And everything that we do, it's always helpful to just remember those goals, to think back to those goals. How is everything we're doing from advocacy to community engagement, et cetera, how are we aligning with those goals? The next section is the master agreement. And so, we've already kind of done a high level overview of it, but I think the important thing to note here at the board level is that the master agreement was kind of drafted with respect to the first levy, right? So it really contemplated the first levy funds and how we were gonna handle those funds. In response to that, we had a shared vision resolution that was signed by CPS or passed by CPS for this most recent tax levy that said, hey, we're gonna kind of keep things status quo. We recognize that there's no references to this new levy and all the funds that will flow from that levy. And so let's go ahead and let's say you and I agree that the funds will be used in the same manner under the master agreement. And there was an acknowledgement there as well that the current master agreement terms expire on June 30th, 2022. And so there's this pending future deadline that we have to meet, and really it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to kind of take a good accounting of what works in the master agreement, what doesn't work, what kind of practically we do and are not able to comply with. And that's an opportunity for us to open up the conversation with CPS and the United Way and expand our authority under that to be able to work in the way that we need to achieve our goals. Shara has already been doing a fantastic job getting the ball rolling on that. So even though that is like a year and a half out, we are beginning those conversations right now. And we will talk kind of about structure and process once we have a little bit more clarity on the best way to do that. But effectively, we are going to have some process by which we will kind of ask for and receive and compile the board's comments on the current version of the master agreement. We already kind of have a running list of things that people have mentioned in the past too. So we are not starting from scratch here. We've got our sea legs out from under us, and we work very efficiently and very well at doing this. So we believe that with a nice year and a half runway, we should have no problem getting this thing executed in a way that not only extends the terms of the master agreement, but kind of expands it and makes it work better for Cincinnati Preschool Promise. I'll pause there as well. Is there any questions or comments on that? Going once, going twice. All right. Finally, and this is the most kind of fun section that I will typically talk to nonprofit organizations about. I'm in section 4. If you're following along, it's on the other governance considerations. What I'm really going to focus on in this section is section B, and that is the authority over the day-to-day activities and operations. This question is often asked because usually when you get a board of managers or a board of directors that want to be involved in the organization, they really want to help make the decisions, and they want to help drive the bus, if you will. But they don't really know what their role should be versus what the role of the executive director and her team should be. What I point out here is that the best practices and what we've chosen to do in our bylaws or in our governance principles is to delegate the day-to-day operational authority to the executive director and her team. Now that's important because the day-to-day operations really means, and this is kind of the analogy that I like to always use, the board is responsible for high-level decision-making and goal setting. In other words, the board decides where the ship is heading. The executive and her team decides how the ship will get there, right? So it's kind of like policy setting versus execution on those policies. There's a reason why you hired your executive team. It's because they're very good at what they do. They know the space incredibly well, and they're able to execute on those things. And frankly, they're boots on the ground. They understand what's going on, not only with their organization, but with peer organizations, et cetera. You've chosen them to delegate authority to them to make those decisions in what they believe in their best business judgment is the right decision for the organization. And so when we talk about giving Shara the ability to say no, it's really an acknowledgement, and a powerful acknowledgement that, okay, we've been doing this for a while now. Let's give Shara some breathing room. Let's let her decide kind of how she's gonna steer that ship. Okay. Now, another question that frequently comes up when we talk about that bifurcation of authority and kind of allowing the executive and her team to go at it and do what they do best is the role between the board, the committees, and the executive team, right? Because the committees usually they do like to get their hands dirty, and rightfully so. You've got a finance committee, a community engagement committee, a governance committee. Those things all kind of are interrelated to the operations of the organization. So frequently those lines become blurred, and it's a little bit more difficult at the committee level to understand, okay, how do we kind of operate and relate to the executive and her team? And specifically, hey, what if we've got members of the board or members of the committee that have recommendations, or they don't agree with the way that the executive is doing something in particular instances. And this is one of the things that we spoke about at the executive committee as well, which is this bow to reality that an executive and her team cannot focus on 15 different reporting points, right? There really needs to be some focal point through which the executive can communicate with the board and where the board can have a consensus. Because, like I said, we disagree on a lot of things. We all agree on the two main goals of Cincinnati Preschool Promise, but rightfully so, and sometimes by design, we don't always agree on how to get there, right? But the executive cannot be kind of beholden to the will of 15 different individuals. The executive really should be reporting to the board, and frankly, specifically in most instances to the executive committee. There are obviously exceptions to this rule, right? It's not a hard and fast rule. It's something that we're going to feel out, something that we're going to get better at over time. But the important thing to note there is if there's an issue with, if you have an issue with how the executive and her team are executing on something, try to go kind of through a normal process first with the board to get a consensus. Do other board members feel this way? And then we can talk about a focal point for how she's going to kind of receive that message, because we want to make sure that the rest of the board is on board with that before we represent, hey, this is what Cincinnati Preschool Promise thinks. And similarly, the executive should really kind of be doing the same thing, right? There should be some very, very well-established channel of command and communication. Now that obviously also applies, and I think more so applies to members on the staff. You got to keep in mind here that you are the board members, right? And the board members have a lot of cachet. A lot of us serve on boards. It's easy to forget about the fact that as a board member, you hold basically the highest position in the organization. That is not lost on the staff, right? And don't misunderstand me. There's not been any, particular instances or anything like that. So this is not referencing it, but I do see this oftentimes in organizations where the board members coming to a staff member trying to tell them, hey, I think we should be doing this instead of that. It's difficult for them because then they're kind of wondering which person they should be paying attention to, right? Should they be paying attention to the executive and the communications they've received from her, which is their direct reporting relationship, or should they be kind of directing to two steps above, which is, or reporting to two steps above, which is the board. There is a power dynamic there that has to be respected, right? And so especially in the cases of when you're dealing with the staff for all kinds of reasons, for legal reasons, for practical reasons, for peace of mind reasons, for the best interest of the organization, that really needs to be focalized through some form of communication, whether that is through the board to Shara and then let Shara communicate that to her staff. However that is, we have to be really, really mindful of focalizing those kinds of communications and directions. One specific, I would say, instance, and this is not a factual instance, just one thing that we do. I think that each committee has a liaison, a staff liaison. So the finance committee is probably, I would imagine that would be Hector, right? As just one example. And I'm sure there are other examples within. That is not to say don't communicate with the staff. That's not saying, hey, hands off, never talk to the staff. We want to encourage communication with the staff. Visibility of the board, top-down culture, organization, all of that stuff is critically important to any organization. So this is not to say don't communicate with the staff. This is to say that if there is direction or comments about how the staff is executing on things, how they're running those operational things. In other words, if there's comments or critiques about how the staff is running the ship, those should be focalized. If you want to communicate with the staff, if you want to ask them questions, if you want to get information from them, if you just want to be an apprised board member, all of that is welcomed and encouraged. And the liaison is probably the biggest gray area, right? Because you've got somebody that's reporting directly to you. The liaisons are fine though. Those are individuals, assuming you're acting within kind of that understood relationship, right? If you're on the finance committee, you're not asking about a governance committee question to Hector or something crazy like that. It's within your scope of authority within the committee, and it's something that is pretty common for you to be talking to a liaison about. That's absolutely encouraged. I will pause there. I think I probably went a little bit over time. Ask for any questions on not just that section, but anything. Well, thank you very much. That's all I have. I will let anybody else take over from there.
All right, well, thank you for that update and refresher. Okay, we're going to go ahead now and have the executive director's report. It may, as some of you may notice, it's in a different position than previous meetings. I always felt that Char was at the bottom and sometimes was rushed as we get close to our ending time. And I think it's important that we give our executive director an opportunity to fully express and report to us, and also when we're as fresh as she is as well. So Chara, go ahead and please give us the executive director CEO report.
Thank you, Dr. Owens. I want to kick it off by first showing you the dashboard that we've developed to kind of measure the metrics. At the November board meeting, the board approved a set of goals and a work plan. And what we committed to is to come back to you and have regular updates on what this is. This is a dashboard that we've created, whiteboarding exercise in process, but wanted to let you see how we are tracking and measuring the goals that we've set out and what we'll be sending to you on a monthly basis to tell you the progress. In the far left panel on the dashboard, you'll see a snapshot of who is in the community provider network, what our application and student attendance process looks like, also our key advocacy agenda items, and also the risk that we also want to tell you to us making and achieving these goals. You'll also see at the bottom an overall of where we are. We're 7 green, 2 yellow, and none in the red. If you see something out of a key measure and a status that's red, it means we're so off track, we don't think we can pull it back in this fiscal year. Yellow means we've had some challenges. We're not at the level we hope we would be, but we have mitigation strategies in place to do it. And green means we're on track to either deliver or exceed on our goals. So in future meetings, you will have this in advance. You're all being sent a copy right now because it's a lot of information collectively. And I just want to highlight a couple of key points. One, to see where we are on our tuition assistance measure. We're at 102% of goal. We set a goal at 600 because we were going to be very cautious in the COVID environment. So we are meeting that goal and now shooting for our stretch goal. Our family engagement activities are progressing very well. We knew that we wouldn't kick that off until January. We currently have 64 families engaged in that, and we know the big kickoff is going to come in February for that. One of our yellow areas is community engagement and getting our ambassadors on board. That was a slow process that we also knew would kick off in January, but we have a strategy in place, and the Community Engagement Committee offered great insight and information on how to get that ambassador program going. I also want to call your attention back to the first panel again. You will also see a running list that we have of the number of providers that we know have permanently closed. Right now, we have 9 providers, 6 of whom are in quality gap neighborhoods. We are also tracking the impact that those closures have on seats. Some of those were COVID related. Some of them were providers choosing to move out of the district. Some of those were retirements. So we're keeping close track on that. Our partners at 4C will also be releasing before the end of the month a report that is for all of Hamilton County that shows us the net loss and gains of providers and seats from the end of 2019 to the end of 2020, so that we are better able to track that. And that report will also help us focus down on those providers that accept publicly funded childcare, which is important to us. And that will help us determine as we start to reassess what our quality gap neighborhood map looks like. That will be very important to how we recruit our next wave of quality improvement providers. We are halfway to our goal as we look to the next of those, and you'll see in the key measures in panel 2, we're 53% of goal. So we want to make sure that those other providers that we recruit are in those quality gap neighborhoods where they're most needed, and that we apply our equity rubric to that in selecting and recruiting those providers. You'll also note that those initiatives that are new from the goals and work plan and key measures are noted with new. You'll also see the priorities that we'll be implementing during this quarter listed under each section of work. So we've divided it into kindergarten readiness, improving preschools, and empowering teachers. Our yellow area is our staff support fund. We've had 33 applicants for that staff support fund and 15 approved in the first cohort. And our concern is that providers are not accessing those free resources as quickly as we had hoped, and that we don't want to leave money on the table. We designated money The money is there for staff support fund for those key initiatives, for retention efforts, for staff support fund efforts, for benefits efforts with those QI providers. So we're changing our tactics a little bit to make sure that we can reach those goals. I'd also like to call your attention to one of the key things that we're doing that hasn't been started, and that's strategic goal 7, and that's identifying opportunities to expand the accessibility and availability of preschool, and we're going to talk about that. You'll also see in our Empowered Teacher panel, kind of our priorities are our education advisory panel that will be convened in January. That was something that the board specifically requested as part of the innovations project. Those are being recruited and in place now. Our partnership and growing activities, the Workforce Development Council, to work on the preschool pipeline. And also, as part of our presentation of these results on a regular basis to our stakeholders, had a good meeting last night with AFSCME, who you know represents almost 35 to 40 family child care provider programs. 18 of them were in attendance to give us regular feedback and appreciated being able to see a snapshot of our progress and the partnership and where we're going. So that's a kind of high level of the dashboard and how we're tracking our goals.
Wow.
We welcome
Fantastic.
feedback, input,
Good.
anything that you think we should do.
Comments from the board?
Hey, I have a question. When we're talking about tuition assistance and we're looking at those providers who are struggling to stay open and keep children coming in and keep children enrolled, is there any way, and this may be a question for Jake and Shara, is there any way to loosen up the language in the master agreement where children have to be 3 years old by September 30th? If we have children who are 3 years old by October 2nd, which was definitely my case when I was at the center, those children were denied. These are children who are coming from CAA and early Head Start, and then they come into preschool and they're denied just because of 3 days. And this is not really helping the families. If they are getting that assistance through CAA and they come over to preschool and they're knocked out or they're denied just because of the 2-day span. I just think that we should look at that given the unprecedented circumstances that we have right now. We're trying to keep kids in seats and we're trying to help families. And if we have money on the table, we should be looking at that a different way.
Terry, are you saying that though that 2-day or 3-day thing, is that an example or is that the only gap we have? Is that just the example?
No, that's an example.
Okay, because we could wait until we redo the master agreement, or we could tackle this as a one-off kind of thing. We've identified a gap where Head Start ends and or early Head Start ends, I guess. Whatever the specifics of it, that would be a great thing to try to get a waiver for Head Start kids to be able to enroll them.
Exactly. Because if providers are telling their parents, okay, your child is in early Head Start and they can come over to Preschool Promise and we get all of the paperwork in, everything is fine. But then because there's a 2-day gap there, these children aren't allowed in. And if we're trying to keep our preschoolers in preschool, what if that parent decides, well, you told me I could get in. Oh, well, I'm leaving. I'm going to another center. You know,
and then that's a whole year between early Head Start and when they can get support for preschool.
Exactly. And that should not be because there's a 3-day difference.
I know that that's a part that's in the master agreement because that is a policy of CPS. However, I do think it's something that we have to, that should be something that's addressed because the date is, I know it's a CPS policy.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I figured that it was, but if we did not foresee a pandemic, nobody knew that this was coming. I mean, as everyone's life is turned up, these parents have to go to work, and they cannot afford to pay their co-fee, their copay. You know, and then providers can't afford to not collect it either. So there's got to be somewhere that CPP can step in and fill in that gap, especially if it's such a short span of time.
So this
Carrie, the thing,
Vanessa.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I understand the full issue. Is there a way to create for us to get a memo on this so we better understand what we're going for?
Yeah, I think that would be good if we have some type of timetable that can be readjusted, you know, not just, okay, September 30th through November 30th. I'm not really sure if that's going to, you know, go,
I guess
but
I think I'm confused still.
3 days should not make a difference.
I think I'm just confused still. Are you saying if their birthday is before that, is it October 31st? Is that what you're referring to, the birthday
No,
deadline?
September 30th. Yeah, September 31st is the cutoff for CPP.
Okay, and that's with turning 3.
Yeah, and I had a set of twins who.
So
their
I know, I
birthday was
don't
on-
want to, I was just trying to understand, not necessarily individual cases, because I think there were some ramifications about this was, I mean, again, the best thing, I mean, I just trying to figure out how to get done and make sure we could serve more children. And this was all about 2 years of quality preschool. So are you saying then that would mean they would get 3 years of preschool before going or to kindergarten?
No, but
because the district's
well,
not
they
going to
would
change
get-
its kindergarten enrollment policy. So that would mean you would be saying they would get 3 years of preschool before they could enroll in kindergarten, if I'm hearing what I think you're saying. And I just think that's the reason. I think that would just open up something that is not as simple as changing it. I think you have to quantify it and all that kind of stuff. Because I think that would be the issue, is then when a parent, the ramifications of, okay, now my child is in preschool for 3 years. And I just think we need to, I just think I need to understand more about what the ramifications, and instead of it's not a case by case, but what's the broader policy issue that we're talking about?
Is the master agreement saying that there should only be 2 years of preschool? Is that what it is?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the core premise of the preschool program. Yeah.
Right.
And Vanessa brings up a good point. Your student who's turned 3, you know, after September 30th, but within, 2 months, there's no guarantee that they're going to also get early entrance accepted either. And that's where that only 2 years of preschool that Vanessa is minding me about is coming from, is because we give them 2 years, and then the next year they should be going on to kindergarten. But the only way they can actually get into kindergarten with a late birthday is that readiness test, which is
Can I speak to that, please, as a parent who have experienced that situation? I had that situation with my oldest daughter going to kindergarten, and I think it's kind of the same situation here, where her birthday was 2 weeks after the deadline. And so, yes, CPS did I think they did a readiness test there. So in the case of preschoolers, and to Terry's point, if there was some kind of allowance to allow that child to go ahead and start, when they get ready for kindergarten, there's a high probability that they won't have any problems getting into kindergarten if they've had those 2 years of preschool. And CPS already have a process to assess that. And so while I agree, we have to maintain the integrity of what we have promised, the 2 years, there's a very high probability if that child had the kind of high quality preschool that we are striving for, there won't be a problem with them getting into kindergarten. I had it happen with my daughter. also had it happen with my granddaughter.
Mhm.
So this is Vanessa.
Well,
I clearly understand the issue. I'm just really asking for some more analysis on it, as opposed to case by
Yeah,
case. Just
yeah.
how it might work.
That's what I like. Could we just see what the
That's
issue
my
is?
request.
I think it's
Well,
really important.
I
This
have
is Deborah. This is Deborah. I think this is a very important issue because this is state mandated. The September 30th birthdays are state of Ohio. I don't know what they are in other states. And I faced that issue too with my son and chose a different pathway to hold him out of school because he was too young, so to speak. But I do think it's important for us to get to continue this discussion in such a way that it doesn't get put off, that we get some type of analysis to come back to the board or some type of issue statement, working with Terry and, maybe the staff to bring this back to us at our March meeting, because it is time sensitive.
It is. It is. And if we're going to try to make sure that we're communicating with the public, that we're communicating with the constituents who voted for this, for CPP to carry on, we need to make sure that they understand that we are working to help them. Whether it goes through or not, we need to make sure that they know that we're working to help them.
Well, and I think there also needs to be something in there because I'm running into this now. My daughter's birthday is later in the year. However, she's been in preschool this is going to be her 3rd year because her birthday's not until December. And due to COVID, they weren't giving in-person readiness tests. So that also is causing an issue where children who are ready, because she passed every other test and was ready actually last year, but because of COVID, they're not doing in-person tests. So we need to also factor that in.
Exactly. And that's why I mentioned, because of the times that we're in, it's imperative that parents know that we're working toward that, or we're trying to address it in some type of way that will mitigate them thinking that, oh, CPP is not doing anything, or they refused or denied my paperwork and I got it all in, and my child is 3 years old, 2 days past cutoff time. I'm not talking about 2 months. I'm talking about 2 days.
Or even 2 weeks. I mean, there is a one-offness to this versus changing a major policy and Ohio revised code date for kindergarten and preschool. Certainly this feeds into that kindergarten date of September 30th. So I'm really supporting Terry's issue in a way that it comes back before the board with some analysis, but with some time sensitivity. And hopefully, Shara, Dr. Owens, is this something we could ask for to come back to our March meeting?
Yes, I was going to ask if we need a resolution to ensure that it doesn't get lost, that the board. So who will, Shara, you will bring this to the March meeting then? We don't necessarily do a resolution, I guess.
Yes, I will. I will bring it back.
Okay.
I will work with Jake to have an analysis. We'll make sure we send it out in advance to take questions and feedback that may come from that memo and be ready for a full presentation and discussion at the March meeting.
Should this flow through a committee first? Should this flow a little bit through the governance committee? Shara?
I would recommend that we flow it through the executive committee
Okay.
rather than the governance,
All right.
given that it's not specifically about operation, about board, how the board operates.
Okay. Executive
thank
committee,
you.
right. All right.
So could we look at getting this back in 2 weeks? And who's going to be the one to put that data together?
I will work with Jake to put that as counsel to put together the legal aspects of that. I can pull the data. Our staff team can easily pull the data for you of the denials that we've had based on age and try to gauge what those ages were so that you can truly understand the number that we received of application denials that are based on that date. Who was too old and who was too young. So that is data that we maintain in-house and we get a report of weekly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you clarify what you mean?
I would like to,
Legal aspect? What do you mean by legal aspects?
I mean, the provisions of the master agreement, what may be in revised code or out of revised code, and any statutory requirements that are associated with that, so that we have a legal analysis that complements what's in the master agreement. Because I think Ms. Alsop did specifically mention some statutory concerns that she had. I would want to incorporate that so that the board has all of the information when they're doing an assessment.
Could I, oh, are we done on that?
Sally.
Because I have a question about the dashboard, which I think is fantastic, by the way. I want to say that very good work on this. Pretty small font, but other than that, it is very readable. You gave yourself a yellow on the staff support fund, but a green on the teacher promise grant. And it just seems to me, and I attended an evaluation meeting on this, so I have a little bit more information. But it seems to me that's a little yellow also. I think at this point in the year with only 56%, and I don't think we've really hit our goals in the past. I'm a little concerned about why people aren't taking this up, and just might, like, if it's yellow, maybe it'll get a little extra look at how we can boost those numbers as well.
Point taken. The reason that we had it, and we can be flexible about moving this, the reason that we have it green is because just on yesterday, we discussed the next cohort, how we were going to drive that, and the strategies to advertise it, and touch points with who we were going to do to try to get those numbers up right away. So we can be flexible about yellow. We put it for green because we felt pretty comfortable with the new strategy we had to get to that number.
Well, putting it at yellow then will make it look even greater that you figured it out and overcame it.
Absolutely. We can make that change. We don't mind at all. Okay.
Okay.
For the next
Other comments? Anything else, Shara?
Yes, the next piece that we'd really like to focus in, and one of our goals was to expand accessibility and eligibility. And really our overarching goal is to make sure that we can get as many children in a high quality preschool seat and make sure that they have access to those 2 years of quality preschool. In February of 2019, the board discussed offering provisional eligibility for providers to offer tuition assistance. And so I am bringing that back with a strategy that we would like to implement that says providers that are in quality improvement, who are on track with their coaching plan, they are scheduled to move up to that high quality 3 to 5 star rating within 6 months. They meet all of the other requirements for tuition assistance, and they have at least 10% enrollment of CPP eligible kids. We would like to go ahead and offer tuition assistance to those providers at the rate that we previously used to offer for 3-star providers before the tuition equalization happened in December of 2019. These providers are completed with receiving materials and supplies. They're completed with receiving educational materials. They're only continuing to receive coaching consistent with their plan, and the same coaching that they would receive if they get to 3 stars based on the 3 to 5 coaching we approved for new transition. When we looked at the number of providers that are ready, we had 7 eligible providers, 4 of whom were in quality gap neighborhoods, with 6 being family child care providers and 1 center. Though we know there are currently 36 preschoolers enrolled, we haven't done an eligibility for those preschoolers because they haven't filled out applications, but we do have some indications from providers that a large percentage of those could potentially be eligible and are receiving publicly funded child care. Those providers, in addition to those 36 that are enrolled, have 48 open seats. What we're targeting to say, can we expand our attendance, our enrolled tuition assistance by 40 preschoolers? The maximum fiscal impact that we think that may have based on a weighted average that we did month by month is $130,000. There is more than sufficient money in our tuition assistance budget to cover that. The duality that this has is it starts to have parents engage with us sooner as their provider is welcome to the tuition assistance cohort, It makes sure that we can keep in touch with them. And it also gives, at a very critical time, some providers a boost that they may need to dollar, keep them moving. It is, as I said, with to identify opportunities for that expansion of accessibility. And so a little bit later than expected, though you discussed it in February of 2019, we're bringing this back to say we'd like to get a consensus from the board to implement this and start reaching out to those providers to have them be a part of tuition assistance.
Shar, do we yet know how many providers are interested in working in that cohort?
Yes, we have 7 that meet all those requirements. We've reached out to all 7 of them that are interested and said it would be valuable to them.
Okay, so, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Okay, so it looks like there's 6 family child care providers and 1 center. Okay. And they are in the process of moving up.
They are on track with their coaching plan, and the prediction and recommendation by the coach is also that within 6 months, they will receive their star. Now, we all know that step up to quality review may continue at the rate it is, or it may slow down. We have some that have been waiting for significant time. We don't want the families to be penalized and not have access to that because of a delay in the system because of COVID. So this provisional eligibility would make sure that that doesn't happen.
This is Pastor Tate. I heard you mention that each of the centers were in a quality gap area. Have we received an update on whether or not some of those gaps have been closed by the centers that are coming on board or centers that are moving into place to receive their stars? Or what are we using there to refer to the quality gap area?
We are still using the quality gap area that we had consistent with the map that we started with. As I said, 4C for Children will be releasing a report this month that will help us analyze if the quality gap neighborhoods have changed. That's also something that Innovations had planned to work with us for through year 4 evaluation. But I do believe that that information from 4C, because it is focused specifically on Hamilton County, the net gains and loss from 2019 and 2020, and those providers that accept publicly funded childcare will give us a view of where those quality gap neighborhoods still are. They've done the data, they're just waiting for the release and that analysis that will give us some insights that will allow us to redraw our quality gap neighborhood map within Hamilton County so that it is the CPS boundaries, and then we'll be better able to tell that.
Will that update change our focus or our strategy in any way that you know of?
Yes. So we will use that quality gap neighborhood map to focus in on who are the providers that we recruit for quality improvement, because we do have 14 more slots available in quality improvement and providers that we're recruiting. It will also be used to meet the other goal that we talked about, is the new providers that we're recruiting for TA that are not part of the CPP network currently. The recruitment of those new providers will be targeted to new that are in the system, ones that we may have reached out before or not, but those that are specifically in quality gap neighborhoods, because we have a duality here of saying, yes, we want to help providers reach high quality, but we also want to do outreach to those that are already high quality to convince them to be a part of our network that will accept Preschool Promise eligible kids.
Awesome. I think it gets us out, gets us more families, which were a part of our goal. And we know in this time, the state has been really slow about coming and doing their, to rate anybody, to either be, even for renewals. So I just think that this is something that it's only going to benefit us in the long run, and it's not a huge fiscal impact. I mean, that's really not, that's a drop in the bucket.
I think the pilot project is excellent, and I see both the ability to handle the kids that are there and and perhaps help fill some of the open seats. So I think it's a very worthy project. I think we ought to take it on.
I also am really excited about this and excited that we're piloting or testing something out. But whenever we test something out, I'm worried about how you would make the decision to either go full or what would happen if you decided not to pursue this post the pilot. So what are the criteria or decision making that you would do? And then what would happen to these students that you are funding through a pilot if we chose not to continue it?
So couple of things. Currently, the way that it's set up for the pilot is if we do it now, it will get us through this fiscal year, right? So the break would be for next academic program tuition assistance year. It would give people plenty of notification to say tuition assistance will or won't be available if we have to discontinue the pilot. The criteria that we've set is to say, how many parents do we have involved? How many kids are actually eligible? And the actual increase that we see in the number of children in seats and the number and whether or not the providers reach high quality. So those are a couple of considerations that I would bring back to the board to say, yes, these providers reached high quality. We know it worked. They got there. They're on track. It was a great plan to do this because we knew. And I will tell you, when we first looked at provisional at the beginning of COVID, because we were concerned that Step Up to Quality was going to be shut down, we worked with 4C and they predicted that there were 14 providers that were eligible to reach high quality. Of those 14, 12 made it, right? So the prediction was pretty good that we were comfortable with. I think the criteria is looking at the additional number of children we were able to serve by this based on compared to the investment, right? That's always going to be our measure. How many kids in seats? And if we find we've done this and we have all this effort we put in it, all this staff capacity, and we maybe still only have that minimum 10% of enrollment, that may be of some concern, right? And you may say to us as a staff, we don't think it's worth the capacity investment, or we may have that recommendation. But in COVID, I'm unlikely to say that when we come back to you with the data and the finding and the recommendations. And we will also pull in our external evaluator to say, what is the best way for us to measure the effectiveness of this?
Shara, when do you anticipate that we would have that data? Because the way I see this being presented, I'm very supportive of it as a go-ahead for a pilot project to see, what this can become. But I think, it's very important for us to have that analysis to support some of Christine's question. Once you put a pilot out there, you set a certain level of excitement and expectation. So I think the sooner the better that we, know what we have and from a going forward standpoint.
So we are ready to implement it, started reaching out to providers with the newsletter that will go out Friday, starting enrollment of these providers and reaching to their families on Monday of next week. We will have results at the end of this tuition assistance academic year, which would be in May. How many kids did we get enrolled in that window? Because that's the best way for us to measure. We would have to wait to the start of the whole new academic year. If we don't have sufficient data from this first few months of the pilot, we would come back to you and say, we want to try it again for the fall academic year. But we at least want to see the traction we can make for the completion of this academic year. So now through May.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Dr. Owens, hearing no strong objections, we'd like to go ahead and revise our overview and tuition assistance eligibility policy and start to implement this next week.
That's fine. Any other board comments about that? Okay, proceed.
Right. The last few highlights we have is just to let you know that we are tracking the American Rescue Plan, the changes that are in President-elect Biden's plan and the American Rescue are focused on the child care provisions, the school provisions, and the other. I would like to highlight that that plan still under consideration that will be proposed does include a $15 minimum wage. which we will be tracking closely to monitor that and where all those additional funds for childcare and early childhood education will be going. We'll also be working with Groundwork Ohio. Their policy committee is convening at the end of this week to be able to bring back to you not only the status of this plan as it develops, but the state of Ohio's plan of what they're going to do with the CARES relief money that were passed December 27th, as well as the Ohio state budget. So we'll be tracking all that and offering you updates on how it impacts our providers. We have a few upcoming events, which is preschool chat on vaccines and COVID. That is for parents and providers. We're also encouraging all providers to attend a January 23rd webinar that is specifically for family childcare providers to apply for PPE loans and SBA loans that have been expended through December 31st. In addition to that, we will have what we hope are companion services from some volunteer and pro bono agencies to help those family childcare providers that were not able to access those funds before to do so now, because that is what they have requested. We'll be presenting on February 8th to the CPS Board of Education. And we'll also be doing another round of PPE supplies for community providers. It'll be on a much smaller scale. United Way has graciously donated PPE supplies that we'll be distributing to providers, and we'll be matching that with one purchased item. Believe it or not, the high item everybody's asked for are foggers. So we're going to distribute those to the providers that may not have those. All of those will be within our line item budget allocation for COVID resources. So we're not overspending, but we're listening to what the providers need and trying to help them source those. So that's kind of the additional highlights to match with the written report that I distributed. And that's all that I have.
Any other comments on her report?
I just want to commend you on the work of being able to really bring community providers along with these government programs that are available. They're, as a small business owner, they're incredibly complex to know what's included and what's available. And leaving money on the table or leaving programs that are out there for them on the table is also would be really a missed opportunity. So as much effort we can put in to really maximize the use of those programs, I think is very worthwhile effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the appointment of Dr. Williams, our newest appointee. Dr. Williams, how are you doing today? Why don't you say hello and share some thoughts with the board first?
Well, thank you, Dr. Owens. First of all, I'm excited to be a part of this group and looking forward to doing what I can do to help moving forward. I appreciate the progress that we've made over the years so far, and apparently the leadership that you guys have had there and the work that the Board of Managers has been doing. And I just want to try to make sure that I can add value. And so I'm anxious and eager to be assigned to a committee so I can get my hands dirty and ready to go.
Well, thank you. We're happy to have you. You bring a tremendous amount of experience and at so many different levels that we will certainly utilize and appreciate your skill set. We're going to appoint you to the Cost of Quality Committee, and I guess this says you need approval.
We do. We need, as with happens at the annual meeting, we need a motion to appoint Dr. Williams to the Cost of Quality Committee and then a full vote of the board.
The board. Okay, fine. I will make the proposal that we assign Dr. Williams to the Cost of Quality Committee. Can I get a response from the board? Any unreadiness? Any questions first about assigning him?
Second.
Okay, fine. Any question about assigning him? No questions. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Oh, sounds like everybody. All those opposed? Good. We want to share the work. Okay, now our committee updates. First one is Executive Committee. And let me just say that I, again, as my first meeting as chair, appreciate the confidence in my fellow managers to appoint me as the chair. My philosophy is that it's not my vision. I'm just a facilitator as your chair. The vision is our collective vision on this board. And I look for you to really help provide the leadership. As I said, I think as the chair, I am just the facilitator and the liaison between myself and our executive director. Our executive committee, we in our last meeting, our big issue was to have a review of our committees and review of certain documents that Jacob has already done. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the governance committee with Deborah.
Thank you, Dr. Owens. I have a couple of items to report. Thank you to all the standing committees. I understand that your committee charters are drafted and will be on their way to the governance committee by March 4th for our review and recommendation for approval at the March meeting. Thank you again. As of December 30th or 31st, we have all of the conflict of interest forms and submitted by board members. Thank you for that. And we're just a tad off on that, but I'm not complaining because we got 100% response. So I will be with Jacob just doing a very high level review. I reviewed them and don't see any issues to bring before the board on those conflict of interest forms, but we'll report back in March. The governance committee looked at our task calendar, and there are 2 items that we are prioritizing for the first 6 months. One is board education. And I think Jacob kicked it off with his document on governance structure and goals. And the other one is moving towards summer to do a board self-evaluation. Some of us got to participate in a fun event back in 2018, our first and only board retreat. We thought big thoughts. We had big deeds to do, and a lot of things got in the way with us really coming up with an action plan. So we've been a very busy board, but we feel that it's really important for us in our maturity to look at ourselves in a more guided self-evaluation process. So we will be reporting and making suggestions, hearing the board's thoughts on how we move forward with that. I have one other item, and it's the records retention policy that you received a copy of in your pre-reads. The governance committee had an opportunity to look at this, and we're bringing this before the board today in first reading. And by that, I mean, you will have an opportunity, if you didn't read it before, to read it and come back at our March meeting. This policy will have to be approved by vote of the board. So it's important that you take the time to go through this. And my understanding is that this document is basically based on best practices. The United Way was used as one guidance level. Cincinnati Public Schools was used as another guidance level. So I will ask if Shara would like to make any comments, because along with Jake, she put this together for us, and this is the first review and comment by the board.
Thank you. And we did use guidance from those other 2 agencies. I will say that this is the policy that we have been following and the practice we have been following that is now going to be formalized through the policy. You will see that just about everything in there requires us to maintain things in the cloud and electronic files rather than hard copy files of most things. You will see in the companion sheets and the addendums, we went through and we tried to put everything in. Not all of those are documents that we currently maintain in all of those categories, but we wanted to make sure that we asked the board to do this once. And so this document retention policy will capture hopefully everything that we have and does comply with best practices and standards. And thank you to Jake for helping us make sure that it's complete and accurate and the best product that we could share with you today for consideration.
So I have a question about this. How do we have any expertise on this? This is something that you've consulted lawyers, you've consulted other large organizations. I'm happy to vote on it, but I don't feel like it's a policy that any of us have any knowledge about.
can help with that too. So I actually took, I think, the lion's share of the drafting on this, and there's a couple of things that I think should give you comfort. One, the first page of this form follows what we consider to be nonprofit best practices. So we use this both nationally for nonprofits and foundations, and also it's tweaked to kind of coincide with the United Way's practice and how they do things. Which is good, not only because the United Way is our member, but also because the United Way is obviously a gold standard for nonprofit best practices here in town. So that, the first part is really just a tee up, fairly generic. I think where the rubber meets the road here is the attachment. That's the schedule that actually says, how long will these items be retained? And what you'll see there is that complies exactly with not only, again, the nonprofit best practices that we always recommend, but also with exactly what the United Way does. And so to the extent that that gives you comfort.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't really concerned about comfort. I think that if maybe this is a technical thing that the board approves it, I think that beyond what you've done and telling us who you've used to do it, to create it, I think we can't possibly have any more knowledge than you. So we can say, yeah, rubber stamp it. And I guess if you're asking us to rubber stamp it, I mean, if that's a technical thing we have to do, I'm happy to do that. I just don't think that unless we are, happen to have some expertise in record retention, we can say yes, but what do we know? We trust you.
I think we also have to exercise our best judgment as to whether or not those rules and guidelines make sense. And our business judgment can guide us there as we look to approve it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
well,
fine.
this is the
That's
first.
fine. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd be one to look at it and have an opinion, so I probably shouldn't speak too soon on this.
No, I think we welcome that, but I think from the perspective of when Jake and I discussed it, and really from a staff perspective and executive perspective, there are documents to which it is solely the responsibility of the board to make sure they're maintained, to exercise your fiduciary duty and oversight responsibilities. So if this just had operational documents, we probably would have adopted that as an internal policy. But it has specific documents that are tied to what are in the governing principles for the board and things that the board maintains. And so that's why we wanted to make sure that we incorporated it in part of those governance principles and an official policy.
Got it.
Dr. Owens, that completes my report.
All right, well, thank you. All right, let's go on to Cheryl Rose and the Finance and Audit Committee, the money people.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're here to provide a brief on the audit results from Cincinnati Preschool Promises fiscal year 2020, which ended June 30th. And hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to review the information that was provided for pre-read. We do seek approval today from the Board of Managers to accept the results of the audit. So I'll highlight a few items in there. We have some discussion as needed. We do have Brian Todd from Clark Schaefer Hackett on the line, and he'd be more than happy to answer any specific questions that you might have. But as an overview, you may recall that we have engaged Clark Schaefer Hackett providing audit services since we started in 2017. And I will say, having been involved with finance, the partnership has been fantastic, and it's interesting over the years how it just improves. We're pleased to report that same as last year, that Clark Schaefer has provided an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that an audit firm can offer to a set of financials. So that is wonderful news for us. And I will attribute the quality of that work to Hector, who has just been vigilant in ensuring that our financials are clean, and also to Don Reynolds and the whole United Way accounting team for the help that they provide us on a regular basis. It really is this partnership that is integral to us achieving this unmodified opinion, which is obviously something very important as we have public funds. So a couple of keynotes from the audit. From an operational perspective, our management and general expenses, so our programmatic expenses, if you will, remained flat, or non-programmatic, sorry, remained flat at about 15% of total spending. Brian has shared with us that's a very high quality outcome, that 85% of the dollars that we are utilizing is going for programmatic expenses. So as we break that down, so those are, there we go. This is a good slide to show you this. So the areas of tuition assistance, of quality improvement, cost of quality, and then you see the sum of total programs there that represents approximately 85% of our total spend. And then management in general is the balance of that, which is roughly about 15%. So very high quality in terms of that. Furthermore, we think it's important to note that, and Brian did outline this, that of the 85%, so of the programmatic expenses, 88% of those actually went directly into the pockets of either preschool providers or teachers. So again, another high ratio of funds is actually going directly into those pockets. The balance of that was really explainable by Metrics IQ contract and some salary for program managers is a big preponderance of that, but high quality results to say the least. Very consistent with last year. I think fiscal year 19, well, actually it's better this year. So of that number, that 88% number that I'm referencing, we were last year at 84%. So really great results here. And then with that, I think we would like to open it up for questions. Dr. Owens?
Okay, questions from the managers.
I have one question, please. And the pages are not numbered, but it's on the page with disagreements with management. It lists other matters,
yeah.
Quality improvement program, cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's after the financial statements there, Cheryl, or whoever's driving.
Yeah, it's page 19 of 20.
Yeah, Deborah, I can speak to that for a minute, Cheryl, if that's okay.
Okay, let me just tell you what, let me tell you what my specific question is, because I understand the document. There is a recommendation on quality improvement program, and I want to be sure I understand that, and it's to strengthen the internal operational reporting. That sentence, it starts, the organization currently tracks cash disbursements by vendor and program category. To strengthen internal operations reporting, we recommend additional tracking of cash disbursements. I'd like to be sure I understand what's the basis of that recommendation.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time in looking at how the organization spends its funds. And one of the things that we noted was that as we were doing our testing and looking to see where the dollars were being deployed, we could see that a vendor was being used for textbooks, for example. So it's Brian Todd Textbook Company. And then those textbooks were deployed to 3, 4, 5 different centers or, center. I'm just going to go with the word center for a moment. So it's deployed to the centers. It's not easily extractable how much it went to any particular center. So I would say that it would be very valuable to you to help tell the story that you could say, Brian's center was a 2-star center. We deployed this much dollars and support, and they are now at a 3-star or a 4-star rating. I think the data exists. It's just not easily extractable and usable at the moment. So our recommendation was to look at your system and see if there was a way to help you tell the story better.
I think that's an excellent recommendation. And again, I pointed that out because it's a great audit, but I think anything to strengthen already very strong operations and something that speaks to community level impact the way that particular recommendation does, I think merits some consideration in follow-up.
Yeah, and Deborah, we're actually meeting in a couple weeks. We have some folks on staff that are data scientists and are meeting with Shara, Hector, and one other individual who I can't remember, just to see if there's an easy way to do that. You know, that's a contribution that Clark Schaefer's making to the organization of that time there. Just wanting to see if we can help you out a little bit further.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we'll move on to, now you had got approval. I guess we have to have approval of the audit report.
Yes.
So will someone make the motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second from Laura.
Okay, let's do a roll call so we have an accurate account. So Micah's still on? Okay, Debbie?
Yes.
Deborah? Yes. Bianca?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Christine? Terry's still on. Okay, thank you. Christine?
Yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
Micah, are you still there? I guess he's gone. Gary? Odell, yes. Cheryl?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Bishop Tate had to go. Sally?
Yes.
And Vanessa?
And should we have Dr. Williams?
And Dr.
vote?
Williams. Yeah, Dr. Williams. I was waiting to see if Vanessa might be the mic, might have been muted. Dr. Williams, yes? Okay,
Yes.
motion's passed. Approval.
Mr. Chairperson,
Yes.
do we accept the audit report or approve it?
We accept it, I guess. We accept the report. It's a motion for acceptance.
Yeah.
Okay. Community engagement, Bishop Tate is gone. Is there another member of that committee that has a report? Vanessa, you're a member of that committee? Is anyone else a member of that committee? Okay, then we'll move on. We'll go to our CPS update. Vera Brooks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me this evening. It's nice to see you all. A few updates from CPS. First of all, we will be returning to blended learning on February 1st. That is all of the details I have at this time for, we are having our debriefing or our meetings tomorrow to roll out. We are very excited to invite our children back, and we have been working very closely with many teachers to ensure that we have a safe return. So during the time that we've been distance learning, we have been reflecting and planning many, many different things. So our focus is definitely shifted to teaching and learning, with ensuring that we still remain in compliance and we still maintain our step up to quality 4 and 5 ratings. At this time, our enrollment with all funding sources, we're at 1,311 students. Out of that number, our goal was 500 in tuition assistance, and our stretch goal was 600. And then first, I want to congratulate Shara and her team for their 616. That is absolutely awesome. We are currently at 562, so we reached our goal, but we're still striving for that stretch goal. So I do want to recognize all the hard work that everyone's been doing. Another thing that we've been focusing on is in strengthening our instructional program. So as you know, our district has the goal of all first graders, all children will read by the end of first grade. So we actually looked at our early learning assessment data, and we have been digging deeper into that data, and we compared fall to fall. And there are 10 progressions. We focused in on 6 that align very, very closely with our district goals. And that was phonological awareness, which we have seen gain in students moving up a level within, but yet we still need to strive and find more inventive teaching strategies as we're in and out of this distance and blended learning. Vocabulary, we saw a dip. So we have already put in place training for our staff, because when we saw a dip in vocabulary, we've also seen a rise in our enrollment with students of different languages and of different types of environments, and just the English spoken word. Number sense, we've kind of stayed flat. We have been consulting with our kindergarten teachers, and we have found that the two areas that we need to strive and do more training and provide more materials to our families is to compose and decompose, and counting, and in those areas of just the basic number sense of knowing more than, less than, things like that. Social emotional learning, we're very excited about. With the programs we put in place, we have seen growth. So that was very nice to know. And then we added two other areas we're going to be focusing on this year and actually looking at data from year to year, and that's communications and small motor coordination, to align with that first grade target of our children having the ability to, when they get into kindergarten, using a pencil and writing and things like that. I'm trying to go fast. Another big thing is our kindergarten transition. We have already started reaching out to some providers. I was on the call today with Learning Grove, and we are available through our customer care. You can reach me through me, Terry, so I'm reaching out to you. For any of your P4s that we want to enroll those families now into a kindergarten. So we're starting that process now. We will come to you. We will bring the technology for them to do that. We are going to have a time period in probably end of February, beginning of March, where families can set appointments or come to the Ed Center to actually enroll into kindergarten. But we will come to wherever people ask us to come to. We'll do a Zoom call, a Google Meet, but to get the word out, to really help those families. We really do want to get those kindergartners enrolled early. So as they're planning transportation, everything else for next year, those families are set. I don't want to take much more of your time. So are there any questions?
Thank you, Vera, for your report.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Rose.
Observers, any observers here? They can speak up now.
I say I'm here, but I already observed.
You already saw. Is there any other observers? I thought I saw.
I'm here. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my camera, but no, I just that this is.
Your dog's got comments. Your dog's.
I know my dog always has comments. The pilot is such an exciting thing, and glad we're doing it so thoughtfully. The team, awesome. I just the providers having this resource during the pandemic and everything that you all are doing to help these families and providers is really remarkable. So nothing but positive vibes for me.
Great. Any other observers? Well, we're a little early, but that's okay. I will accept a motion for adjournment.
That's my job. That's my job. I make a motion.
Oh, that's your job. Okay, I'm sorry, Laura. You got to educate me. You got to educate me. Go ahead.
I motion to adjourn.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. And we'll see you on March the 16th.
Thank you.
All right. Congratulations, Dr. Owens. Fine first meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. I
good
appreciate
job.
it.
Good
I
job.
appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Dr.
Shara.
Thanks. Bye-bye.